The king has fallen, and the battle for the throne has begun. Men and women from various tribes across the realm have stepped forward to stake their claim. But the heir of the late king still lives, concealed and slumbering from an afflicted curse. As the confidant of the prince, you are entrusted with the mission of unraveling the source and lift the malicious spell to save your childhood friend, so that he may take his place as the rightful ruler. In the midst of all the chaos, a mysterious entity has appeared in the sky, declaring the beginning of a tournament to determine the next king. Together with your trustworthy and capable companions, you must participate in the tournament while searching for the means to save the prince. In seemingly insurmountable odds, you must battle rival contestants, forge bonds, secure alliances, travel the world, discover the truth, and save the kingdom from turmoil. Welcome to Metaphor ReFantazio. Holy moly, Atlus is ending the year with another banger. And here I thought Persona 3 Reload was already great. Before the release of Metaphor, I was so sure, saying, no way a new IP was going to exceed the high standards set early this year. And I could not have been more wrong. Metaphor ReFantazio is an excellent game, and it's my personal game of the year. It takes everything that makes the Persona games great and elevates them to the next level. With that said, I will be drawing many comparisons between Metaphor and Persona to drive my points. So sit back and relax as I tell you the many reasons why Metaphor ReFantazio is fantastic. So without further ado, let us begin. Like Persona, Metaphor ReFantazio is a turn-based role-playing game. But unlike the prior entries, the setting of the world is based on the fantasy medieval kingdom of Uchronia instead of fictional modern-day Japan. And because of this, one of the features of this new location is the distinct visuals and art style in comparison to Atlus's prior titles. Metaphor utilizes various visual techniques to bring its world to life. The anime character models and design remain intact, much like the Persona games. In addition, Metaphor also showcases locations and set pieces, each with its own color palette, making the experience of traveling to new places exciting and refreshing. Given the premise of Metaphor, the game is able to provide a wide range of places throughout the world. This is because unlike the Persona games, where you are a group of students balancing school life and trying to save the world, Metaphor's premise entails traveling around the realm and discovering new areas. Instead of being confined within a school and all its nearby vicinities, Metaphor does not have such limitations and therefore provided Atlus creative control in the design of the many gorgeous sights that can be seen in the final game. With a mix of 3D models, cel shading, and even watercolor-like paintings, Metaphor is a visual delight to behold. With the numerous locations I mentioned earlier, players can expect to experience a wide array of locales such as vivid cities, humble villages, lush forests, dim and foreboding dungeons, caverns, snowy landscapes, and many more. There's also no shortage of visual flair in combat. Whether it is the particle effects of flashy animated abilities or character models brimming with detail, Metaphor ReFantazio is eye candy from start to finish. Rest assured that the game will be a visual spectacle all throughout your playthrough. Metaphor ReFantazio is proof that photorealistic visuals are not always needed to be great. Simply a good art style is sufficient for a game to look graphically stunning. And just as amazing as the visuals are the audio design. If you're a veteran of the Atlus games, then you should already know their track record. Whether it is the voice acting or the soundtrack, Metaphor will not disappoint. The audio of Metaphor ReFantazio delivers the high quality we have come to expect from the creators of the Persona games. In line with the game's theme, you can expect to tune in to an over-the-top adrenaline-raising soundtrack using various orchestral instruments that never get old. Don't take my word for it, just listen to them yourself.
Flare!
You hit their weakness!
I'm
That's
not
your
out of
opening,
this
Captain!
yet! Let's do this! Not the right move. You first.
Stroll
I
can't take
stand,
anymore.
comrades!
Someone
Lend me
kill
your
him.
strength!
Coordination is key!
Pierce through them!
Hulkenberg's fully exposed a new weakness!
Is that all? Four! One
Got
remaining!
one.
Let us
Who's
clean up
next?
this mess. I have you!
Lead!
Keep moving.
They chose the wrong opponent.
Suffice to say that Atlus did not spare any expense with the music production of Metaphor. And speaking of going all in, the same can be said with the amazing voice acting. Not once did I recall that the voice work had poor quality or felt off in the game, bringing the many characters in the world to life. As a fan of storytelling in JRPGs, terrible voice acting can be very immersion breaking, and at times can be a deal breaker in recommending a game. But fear not, as the VA quality of Metaphor is what we have come to expect, and the main cast did a phenomenal job and definitely deserve more projects in the future. Again, you don't have to take my word. Simply hear them yourself.
But that attack took place years ago, didn't it? This curse's formula could be lost for good.
We have little choice but to hope it's not. I'm not saying it would be easy, and the real trick will be finding it. We wouldn't leave it unprotected.
Right, everyone. Farewell said, particulars packed.
All that remains is to ride to Oceania with pride in our hearts.
Watch out, Louise. You won't know what hit you.
Well then, off to the races, what? Old Barden's given me a detailed map of the area.
Sounds like quite a journey. I hope it won't be as bumpy as last time.
Oh no, it'll be a sight smoother. But you've got wings. What are you fussing for?
Kudos once again for Atlus for the remarkable soundtrack of Metaphor. But honestly, was there ever any doubt given their history? Now with the visuals and audio complete, how does the story hold up? I am pleased to say that the writing is great. While it is a tale that you have not heard of before, and I already touched on it in the beginning of this video, it remains a story well told, and it is about the journey and not the destination. Keep in mind that there are some slight spoilers ahead. While some of the story details I will be mentioning are things that you will encounter early in the game, I understand that some of you would want to experience the game fresh. So again, this is a spoiler warning. Spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like the classic tales as old as time, the premise of Metaphor ReFantazio is the assassination of the king, with the mastermind being one of the kingdom's prominent generals and tactician, Luis. And his motive for the heinous act is to usurp power so that he may take his place as the next ruler of the kingdom. But just when all hope is lost, guess who steps in to save the day? That's right, it's the protagonist who is apparently the childhood friend of the late prince. However, you eventually discover that your best friend still lives, but is suffering from a curse. Thus begins your hero's journey of seeking to save the prince and the kingdom from the clutches of Luis and all those vying for the throne for their own ends. I will say it right off the bat, this is not the most original story you have heard, and that is okay in my books, because the execution of the narration is simply well done. Like I said earlier, Metaphor's story shines through the course of the journey. Not that it doesn't have its own fair share of twists, believe me, it definitely does, especially towards the final act. But I will leave that for you to experience. Right from the beginning, I can tell that meticulous detail was given to the dialogue. Believe me, there are plenty in this game, so a little caveat, this game is very cutscene heavy. But in exchange, you get to experience some of the most likable and developed characters that you will come to appreciate. Metaphor's story is best enjoyed if you take your time. The dialogue has been written to perfection, and very clearly a lot of work was performed behind the scenes to breathe life into each of the characters' stories. Given the title of the game, Metaphor tackles many themes that mirror real life. If you are concerned that it will come off as preachy, this couldn't be further from the truth. Each of the members of your party and the other supporting characters' story arc integrate brilliantly into the main plot. I could never forget the conviction of Stroll as he finds the true meaning of nobility. The stalwart former knight Hulkenberg as she navigates the path of duty and responsibility. Heismay's journey as he rediscovers the purpose of life after loss, and many more companions that you will encounter on your journey. Suffice to say, if you're into strong and rich storytelling in JRPGs, then you're in for a treat with Metaphor ReFantazio. Not only are they incredibly immersive, but are also meaningful that you can carry with you in your day-to-day life. On top of empowering story arcs, the game also tackles heavy themes such as navigating political landscapes, poverty, oppression, and discrimination of both race and social class, which again are subject matters that reflect the world we live in. As a tip, if you're just about to play the game, I recommend dedicating at least 3 to 4 hours per session, as the narration of the story is very extensive. I for one am excited to see where Atlus will take this new world that they have created. Very clearly, they invested huge resources on the world building, the lore, and the characters. Now that we are done with the visuals, the audio, and the story, like I always say, it is time for the most important component of any video game, and that is the gameplay. And in a nutshell, it blew my expectations. I mentioned early on that I was expecting Metaphor to be a solid game, and little did I know that it turned out to be the evolution of the Persona games that I have come to love. And I am all for it. Whether it is exploration, interaction with the characters, or combat, Metaphor ReFantazio's gameplay has made big strides forward that I never thought was possible in already established mechanics. So let me break it down. Let me begin with exploration and interaction. The kingdom of Uchronia is teeming with people in need of help, monsters that need slaying, and treasures and secrets just waiting to be found. While it may sound overwhelming, I was impressed with how Metaphor was able to relay these quests in a digestible manner. The quality of life features in comparison to the games before it are a huge step forward. No longer will you need to research on the internet to determine where you need to go, as the game's UI does that well enough for you. Now I know what some of you will say, isn't this hand-holding? But I personally welcome it, as given the abundance of things to do, it is simply more efficient to have the UI guide you adequately. Wondering how to defeat the boss in the bounty? Simply visit the tavern and pay the informant to retrieve details on its weaknesses. Feeling lost on who you should mingle with next? A hint will be given to you at the start of your day, and even when scrolling through the people you can speak with, a bright red symbol will appear to tell you that you should talk to that particular character to move their story arcs forward. And I cannot overstate how much of a godsend this feature is. In my first run for Persona 5 Royal and Persona 3 Reload, I never bothered to perform any research to max out my social stats rank for all of the characters. For Metaphor ReFantazio, however, I managed to max out all the bonds without having to check any guides. Speaking of relationships, Metaphor ReFantazio calls this feature bonds. Like the social links in Persona 3, you're able to interact with your party members and many of the supporting characters to cultivate a deeper relationship and develop their story arcs. The key differentiation in Metaphor, however, is that each time you unlock a new rank for these characters, you are given a reward for doing so. Why is this so important? Because in the Persona games, you will have to reach a certain rank before you unlock particular perks. For Metaphor, on the other hand, for every instance of progression, you will be rewarded whether through exploration, combat, or both. The point I am trying to emphasize now is that the bond system of Metaphor is superior to the Persona games, because the feeling of progression is always present. While in Persona, there are instances where you receive no reward apart from the story moving forward. Metaphor also has its own version of social stats in the Persona games called Royal Virtues. There are 5 Royal Virtues, namely Wisdom, Tolerance, Eloquence, Imagination, and Courage. These are the protagonist's characteristics that grow over time in the story that can increase up to level 5. And again, I did not need to research online on how to max them all out in one run, as the game will give you plenty of opportunities to do so. It is in your best interest to max these out, as not doing so will lock you from completing all bonds in the game. The quest system and interface are a huge upgrade from the Persona games, and this will be the golden standard from Atlus games moving forward. Now, one last detail for the exploration before I proceed to combat, and that is traversing outside of cities and the deadline management. Once again, like the modern Persona games, Metaphor ReFantazio's story moves forward through deadlines indicating that you have started the next chapter of the main story. More in line with Persona 5, you are given a number of days to complete a main quest objective, which entails traversing through a large dungeon and reaching the end to fight the boss. These dungeons are usually very large and are not meant to be completed in one day. Unless you have done some serious grinding, you will be depleted of MP long before you reach the end. Akin to the safe rooms of Persona 5, Metaphor's equivalent of these are called Magla Hollows. They are checkpoints within the MSQ dungeon where you can warp out to recuperate in town and teleport back once your party has recovered and ready to venture deeper. If you are worried about lacking in time, don't be, as the days provided are more than adequate. In my opinion, you will have to be intentionally reaching the deadline for you to actually experience it and witness one of the bad endings. So far, in the days management and deadlines, it is pretty much one-to-one with Persona 5, so you may be wondering, why did I even bother to bring it up in the first place? Well, wonder no more, as once again, the execution takes a step forward. In the Persona games, the premise limits the vicinity of the game to be in school and the nearby venues surrounding it. I already touched on this earlier, but in Metaphor, some days will be spent for you to traverse the various set pieces in the world, leading your party to new vistas and locales. This is visualized through the beautifully drawn world map and watercolor painted light backgrounds. This to me is a big step forward, as this mitigates the monotony of seeing the same locations over and over again throughout the game, and I believe this deserves to be praised. Instead of being confined in the city, Metaphor has that opportunity to introduce a much larger and livelier world, and Atlus did exactly just that. To get to new lands, you will be traversing on a large vehicle known as the Gauntlet Runner. You will have to spend additional days just riding the Gauntlet Runner to reach your next destination. This to me is a clever add-on for the management of your days. You can even bond with your party, cook, read books to increase your royal virtues, or even do the laundry while waiting in the Gauntlet Runner to reach your next destination. I would say that this hits 2 birds in 1 stone, but it actually hits 3 with how the mechanics of the game have been cleverly intertwined. And those are my thoughts on the exploration and why I think it is a step forward from Atlus's previous titles. And now finally we can talk about the most crucial component of the gameplay, and that is combat. I feel like an incredibly broken record in this video, but for the nth time, Metaphor has taken established features forward. Metaphor's turn-based combat is fundamentally the same as that of the Persona games with some key differences. I will start with the similarities. First, the key in battle is creating a diversified team that can handle as many attack types as possible to be able to determine and exploit enemy weaknesses. The attack and magic types remain the same, particularly with Persona 3 Reload, namely Slash, Strike, and Pierce for physical attacks, Fire, Ice, Electric, Wind, Dark, and Light for magic attacks. Buffs and debuffs also make a return, with heavy emphasis on them towards the late game. Status ailments are extremely punishing if you do not remove them from your party as soon as possible. Turn execution also remains the same, where your entire party takes their turn first, then the enemy, and vice versa, depending on the situation. And that is where the similarities of the two games end. And if you were to ask me, on a macro level, Metaphor ReFantazio has the better system. And let me explain why. For starters, in Metaphor, you're able to visualize the turn sequence on top of the screen in the form of crystals. The stats of each party member will determine who gets to act first up until last. Each crystal equates to a turn, but the added twist and one of the most prominent features in Metaphor is what we call quote-unquote half a turn. So you may be asking, Gray, what is half a turn? Make it make sense. So I will try to explain it as simply as I can. So bear with me. In managing your turns in combat, it is greatly encouraged for you to fully know your team's capabilities and your opponent's weaknesses. This is because should you attack an opponent's weakness, they will not get stunned like in the Persona games, but instead, you will end up consuming only half a turn, which can be seen where the crystal on top only shrinks and not disappear upon the execution of that turn. The same goes for having one member of the party skip their turn. Skipping a turn will only consume half a turn, leaving the remaining half for the next party member to utilize. This opens the door to a new layer of strategy. So let's say you need to attack an opponent that is weak to fire magic. You will then need to cast fire magic, and the current party member's turn does not have it. What you can do instead is pass the turn to the next party member that you know has fire magic, dealing greater damage without consuming an extra turn. But be warned, this is also how it works for your opponents. Should they attack your team that is weak to their attack type, they get an extra turn. Dodging and repelled attacks consume 2 whole crystals for either party, so be sure to not trigger these, as doing so can be severely punishing. This essentially increases the stakes. This crystal mechanic can be used to your great advantage, but one wrong move can spell disaster. Suffice to say that turn management is even more critical in Metaphor, as you will have to know your party inside out to be able to control the flow of battle. If you are confident that you can afford to be aggressive, you may use coordinated attacks called synthesis, where 2 or more of your party members perform a powerful attack that costs 2 to 4 crystals depending on the archetypes they are equipped with. Which leads me to the conversation of archetypes. In a nutshell, this is Metaphor's equivalent of personas in the Persona games. In terms of mechanics, they work pretty much the same, with some changes in the customization. Each member of your party has an archetype, which in layman's terms are similar to classes, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. But the difference from personas is that they are far less in quantity, but they can quote-unquote evolve to a second or third form, provided the party member meets certain conditions in the story or an archetype level. What I prefer with the archetypes over personas is that development is not simply focused on the protagonist, but the entire party. Unlike the Persona games where the main character can swap personas during battle, the protagonist in Metaphor can only equip one archetype at a time. But in exchange, you can customize the archetype of not just the protagonist, but your entire party. This is the opposite approach of Persona, where only the main character's persona can be customized. Sure, you can argue that you can tweak the abilities of the personas of your party members in those games, but it does not come close to the flexibility of Metaphor for your entire party. To further add depth, you can copy and enhance the archetypes with new abilities with the mag currency in the Academia, which is Metaphor's version of the Velvet Room in Persona. How much you can customize the archetypes is dependent on your progress in the game in level and rank with your bonds. The reason I prefer the spread out character development of the archetypes is because it encourages experimentation. It opens a wider array of tactics and discoverable new synthesis attacks that is not available in the Persona games. Let me drop a few more miscellaneous quality of life features in Metaphor that I believe deserves to be acknowledged. One is that Metaphor allows you to infinitely reset every battle from the beginning. So in case that you think you made a big mistake or that you're about to lose, you can simply just hit reset and start again. The other feature, while I am aware is not an original idea, is that when encountering enemies in exploration, if you're at a high enough level, you can simply defeat them in exploration rather than having to engage them in combat. This will feel like you're playing an action game instead of a turn-based one. But in my point of view, this is a much welcome quality of life improvement to mitigate having to waste too much time on fighting foes that are weaker than you. I even got so hooked on grinding in this method that I was incredibly overpowered by the time I reached the endgame. And in its defense, this is a feature that you do not need to abuse, but is present nonetheless for those who want to feel overpowered in the game. Pro tip, use the mage archetype lineage to defeat opponents to recover MP. Each opponent you take down using the mage while exploring recovers 1 MP. And finally, we are wrapping up this video. Now I know I may have missed some of the gameplay features, but I believe I have made my case on why I absolutely adore this game. Again, Metaphor ReFantazio is my personal game of the year. The visuals are eye candy with its art style, without resorting to photorealistic visuals. The audio is just as superb, with the amazing performances of the voice actors and composers of the heart-racing soundtracks that never waver in the entire experience. The premise, while nothing groundbreaking, is very well told, with likable cast of characters in a world that is ripe for new stories. The gameplay has taken what made its predecessors great and even evolved the mechanics in exploration, interaction, customization, and combat, alongside numerous quality of life improvements. Metaphor ReFantazio is Atlus's magnum opus and the new golden standard, and I am very excited to see where they will take this new IP next. Alright, that's it for today, and boy did this video last much longer than I anticipated, which is probably a reflection of how much I like this game. With that said, if you want to see more of this type of content in the future, do subscribe. Happy JRPG gaming, and I will see you next time.